Hey everyone, welcome to Dismantling Injustice, the podcast of Brooklyn Community Bail Fund. At BCBF, we work with community members to free people from incarceration, including prison, jail, detention, and surveillance. And on this podcast, we offer analysis on issues affecting folks who encounter the criminal, legal, and immigration systems. I'm Carl Hamid Lipscomb, BCBF's Director of Advocacy and Policy, and I'm here with Salih Israel, our Director of Special Initiatives and the producer of this podcast. So this week's episode is a little different. Our previous episodes have focused on an aspect of the criminal, legal, or immigration systems and how we move toward decarceration and abolition. But today, we're going in a slightly different direction. Today, we're going to talk about organizing. A lot of folks are talking about how we hold those in power accountable, especially, now that Biden's been elected with all of the controversy going on around Cuomo. And one way of doing that is by organizing. I've talked about this previously, but I worked as an organizer for many years and saw how effective organizing is as a tool. But organizing has changed since, way back in the prehistoric years when I got started. So, I thought it would be good if we talked to one of my compatriots, I think I used that word correctly, who currently works as an organizer and has been an organizer for many years and at the forefront of many of the major movements in New York City in particular, and who's organized in many different contexts. And her name is Carlene Pinto. Carlene is an organizer's organizer, as we call it. She currently leads the New York City Action Lab, which she founded. She's worked in the immigrant rights movement. She's mobilized faith communities. She's worked in disaster relief. She's fought criminalization and for racial justice. She really has been at the forefront of many different movements over the last decade. Welcome to Dismantling Justice, Carlene.
Thank you so much. Excited to be able to share some of my expertise with you all. What a critical conversation to bring to light in this moment.
Yeah, of course. And so I wanted to start by just talking a little bit about you. What got you interested in organizing? How did you start out?
So I am a native-born New Yorker, and I was born and raised in Brooklyn, in Redwood, Brooklyn, Carroll Gardens, downtown area. And my mother was a single mom of three, a social worker, and I understood well, even as a young child, my first grade, second grade, fourth grade experiences, I kind of knew what social inequity and social injustice looked like, because the race dynamics and socioeconomics in my community will play out around resources and adequate access to education. And what really kind of changed my course and my direction in life and the way I thought was when I was 15 years old. I had a good friend, his name is Angel Castro, and he lived out in the Bronx by Yankee Stadium. And when I was 15, he was charged with a crime he didn't commit. He was sentenced as an adult, and he was given 12 years. And so over the course of my early adolescent years, coming to age, filling out college applications, I had a friend that was incarcerated, right, and fighting for his life at the time. And through my higher education, going to state universities, I went to SUNY Oneonta, I attended SUNY New Paltz for a little while. My good friend Angel was also serving his time trying to get into educational access programs at Fishkill Correctional Facility and in Green Correctional Facility, two medium to maximum adult prisons in upstate New York. And so a lot of organizers have similar stories like I do, that we didn't necessarily pick this work. There was something in our lives or the conditions of our understanding of the world, coupled with an event, a tragedy, an injustice kind of catapult us into this work more intentionally. And so that was when I was 16. We fast forward, more than a decade. I'm in my early 30s. And, my understanding of the opportunities and the privileges that I've had that my counterparts like Angel Castro, there's our life circumstances are very similar when we talk about our ethnic backgrounds, our family socioeconomics. but unfortunately the system targeted him in a way that I wasn't, right? And his ability to be able to survive, even to this day is an uphill battle, right? And so the reason why I organize is for directly impacted people, whether it is, me reminding myself of my commitment to angels or my understanding that, folks that lived in my community, didn't have access to state schools, right? And so now we have the conversations about educational access. And in communities like Harlem, we have, structures like Columbia. But most of the young people in Harlem that need access to higher education are not having accessibility to be able to go to Columbia, right? So my organizing came out of, the fight against mass incarceration and educational access.
Wow, thanks, Carlene. That's such a powerful story. And so, many of our listeners have heard of organizing. They hear of organizing on the news. I think a lot of people, organizing came into sort of like the mainstream lexicon when Barack Obama was elected, and he talked about being a community organizer. But oftentimes, I don't know that people really know what we mean when we say organizing. So how would you define organizing, and what's the role of the organizer?
Wow, such a complex question. What the act of organizing is really just facilitating and holding space for people to discuss a problem or an issue and work together on strategies and solutions, right? And so, the core of every moment of organizing, it has a problem, it has community, and it has a solution. And so I think it's the best organizers are able to pull together people where you have a variety of stakeholders and experiences where you can craft the best potential strategies and solutions for whatever that issue is. And in the context of right now, I think a lot of people are conflating organizing and activism. And so, 95% of my work is convening people, spaces, and resources. Or making sure that the people that have the best strategy have the resources, or, us positioning resources in a way where the people would want to, come to the table and be able to mass distribute said resource, right? The process of organizing is convening, it's educating, it's anchoring and rooting your intention and your attention.
Mm-hmm. And you started to touch on this. How is organizing different from similar but related strategies like mobilizing, like coalition building, like just, generic activism?
I think that organizing, if we wanted to kind of like describe the ways we, seasoned folks talk about it, organizing would be like our industry in our area, right? Organizing is the process of trying to put together these things. Now, mobilizing people is the process to which you're now utilizing a strategy, right? Mobilizing people means that you are literally getting people energized, you're getting movement, and you're pushing people to take action or mobilize around an issue area. I think that when we're talking about organizing, people forget that organizing is a craft, a skill set, and it's any number of tools, like mobilizing, like educating folks, like, direct action, right? Because direct action is a way that you're mobilizing people to take action, but then direct actions themselves, there's 1,000 different ways where you can take direct action. And I think that people always have to scale those terms back into whether you're an activist or whether you're an organizer. Because activists are activating and mobilizing independently or around one issue and they're taking it up as an individual. And organizing is this ability to always center the collective. Because organizing in its root is you have to be in and around and with community and groups of people that you're creating into this community to be able to tackle that issue together, right? Like, I think that's the beauty of how I think about and I talk about my role as an organizer. It's like I'm in community. I'm constantly working on these strategies or these resources to be able to employ. Now, if I was an activist, I wouldn't necessarily at the core structure everything I'm doing around making sure that the community is centered or there's other stakeholders at the table. I might just lead direct actions all by myself. And I'm only organizing a direct action. I'm not actually tending to the organizing, which is feeding and farming our communities, right? Mm-hmm. I think that's the care that we have to start centering when we're talking about organizers and organizing, is that we're the people that are building community and working through community no matter what those obstacles are, whether it's the trauma, whether it's the danger, whether it's the the misogyny, whether it is, the miscommunications, we are the people that are the practitioners every day of that work.
Mm-hmm. I'm with you. And, one of the reasons that I thought of you for this conversation and that I'm excited to have this conversation with you is because you and I, we share something in common in that we have organized in different contexts. And so, a lot of people don't realize that, when you hear people talk about organizing, it's often romanticized and it's like, oh, I organize people that are directly impacted, or I went door to door. But there's different context of organizing. There's faith organizing, there's immigrant organizing, there's housing organizing, there's tenant organizing, and all of these types of organizing are different. And I know that you have experience organizing in different contexts. I know you've organized faith communities, and you've done immigrant organizing, which is how you and I first met. How are these different? How would you say organizing different? Organizing is different in various contexts.
I think that one thing I'm so grateful for, and to your point, is that me having came into the organizing spaces over a decade ago, I was brought in as a generalist with the Riverside Church, right? Where they were like, we have 17 different programs, issue areas, and problems, and we're going to need you to help us move conversations, policies, issue areas, programs, and actions for all of them, right? And so I came into this world where I am not a formally undocumented individual. So the plight of the immigrant experience is not mine to own. It is the experience of, of my grandmother, my father, who immigrated here from Cuba, but that's not my story. And when we're talking about these different issue areas like immigration, when we're organizing in the immigrant rights spaces, we have to be organizing from the direction that we're not here to cause any harm. So that's the first thing, that if you're organizing, you're a practitioner of, the skills of organizing, and you're here to serve the community and the people. Your first goal, no matter what space you're operating in, is that you're not there to do any harm. And you're there to help solve a problem with a solution that causes no additional harm, right? And so whether it's immigration, whether it's faith-based, it's about connecting to the people who should be those spokespeople, those people who are directly impacted by that issue area, because now they are helping drive your intention and your attention, because you're here to solve a problem for this person. Now, if it's a housing issue, you're there now talking to a resident who's facing eviction, right? Like, if we're trying to talk about solving, the housing crisis, it is an issue with, the interfaith community. And we have, an uptick in, the targeting of Muslim Americans post Donald Trump coming in and instituting the Muslim ban. Now we're in community with Muslims and we're saying, okay, at the core of issues in the Muslim community, what do solutions look like, right? And so when we're talking about those moments, the first thing is always anchoring the directly impacted people, not just because their story is important, but because this issue, whatever it is, directly impacts them. And so if you're an organizer, you want to see them be liberated from whatever issue area that is that they're fighting against, or that they're trying to, advance in whatever context we're talking about. But more importantly, in this moment, I think people are tying their personal experiences and who they are into their organizing in a way where it's taking us further from our needs of service. Mm-hmm. And I say that because in this moment, we probably have, for the first time, thousands of people in New York that are identifying themselves as organizers. For the last decade, Carl, me and you can attest, there were very few organizers that were either generalists or strategic to their issue area, that they did cross coalition building, right? Where like you're an immigrant rights leader, but you're going to show up for a housing issue, just like you show up for an interfaith issue, just like you show up for like a local community problem, right? That wasn't the ecosystem we had because the capacity and what we were up against here. Now we're seeing a morph where we have a lot of folks identifying as organizers, but they haven't necessarily been able to take some time because of the climate they're in, right? They're just serving their communities. They're just stepping up to do direct aid. People have not been trained in, like, Kenyan principles of nonviolence. Folks have not been trained in, like, the core principles that we can find in pieces like emergent strategy, which really allow us to understand our privileges and understand our personal understanding of our role in the work and be able to best serve. And I say that just in context in this moment. I can speak for my own community, the Latinx community, right? That we have been traditionally having a lot of issues showing up as, you know, Latino leaders across issues that might be more divisive to our bases, like, you know, confronting anti-Blackness. But now we have a case in our community, the Alan Feliz case, where in 2019, a Dominican brother, Alan Feliz, was stopped in a traffic stop by Montefiore Hospital, and the outcomes to this traffic stop were that he was gunned down and murdered in the middle of the street. And now we're fast forwarding 2 years later, and the entire country is screaming Black Lives Matter, and we're having the conversation about representation and solidarity between the Black community and the Asian community. But I can't get the Latinx community and the Dominican communities to anchor how, you know, defunding the police and conversations of police brutality have to be had right now because we still have families grieving and this fight is our fight, you know? And so in the context of organizing, if I can get every single Latinx person that has went to a BLM march to understand that they have a personal responsibility to start that organizing work, and that can just start with transparent conversations about not doing harm in their own communities, we could take this thing a lot further than where we are right now. And I say that because in the Latinx community, misogyny and violence is a core issue and obstacle for us. And when we talk about the trans violence we're hoping to eradicate, when we see trans members of our communities that their average life expectancy is only 34 or 36 years old, because of the violence and misogyny of men in our communities, that's something I always try and bring some education and some light to. Is that, you know, we don't have to have everyone committing to being an organizer. We need people to commit to organizing at every opportunity they can get, mobilizing resources and educational materials at every opportunity that they can get, and really just stepping into what are really uncomfortable conversations around privilege and, you know, purpose in this moment.
Yeah, you know, that's what I tend to tell people. I get this question a lot. What can I do right now? Like, especially from, you know, very supportive white allies. And I always say, organizing starts at home. What you can do right now is go and talk to your family members that are more conservative, that don't understand why we say defund the police or what we mean when we talk about abolition. And you can start having that conversation with them. You know, so organizing, it starts at home. You know, I don't want to take up too much of your time, Carlene, because I know you have to get back out there on the streets doing the organizing that you do. But I was hoping you could talk to us about what you're doing right now with New York City Action Lab. How does your work look? How do you support campaigns and movements?
Yes, so I am so blessed, Carl, that New York City Action Lab, although we are seeing this moment of you know, economic uncertainty locally, our team has just been supported at every call to action we've led. And so the last 2 years, we've been doing a lot of base building and community education work, prepping people for the 2021 elections. And so Action Lab, we take on a number of, you know, we're not a nonprofit, right? And so for folks listening that are unfamiliar, Action Lab is almost one of a kind strategic organizing shop, right? There's really no one else that exists like us in the city, where we have these wraparound services and programs where we work with nonprofit organizations. They contract us to help elevate and support campaign work while we expand their capacity, training their organizers, And then those same organizers that work for some of these nonprofits that unfortunately might only be a part-time position, or it might only be for a certain amount of time when that nonprofit has funding, 12 weeks, 15 weeks. Now, Action Lab is building relationships with the organizers, and we're able to really grasp what their cultural competencies are and then be able to utilize them for other activities, opportunities, or community building activities as we move through. And so we have about 20 organizers in our network that speak about 15 different languages. All of our organizers make between $20 and $35 an hour because we believe in compensating people for what is the most difficult work, which is community work. We work around strategies and solutions for campaign problems. We're helping elevate and help run actual political candidates for office. And so beyond some of the work that we're already doing right now with organizations like New York Immigration Coalition, African Communities Together, Asian American Federation, around, legislative priorities or community resource-based events, we're also then working with political candidates like Tahani Abushi. And so 2 years ago, our team made a commitment to Tahani Abushi where we thought she would be the most progressive district attorney candidate, not only that New York has ever seen, but that the country's ever seen. And so for listeners that aren't familiar, there is we're having citywide elections in June 2021, and we're having to mass educate people on the roles that we need people to prioritize voting for. And when we talk about criminalization and we talk about mass incarceration, it's important for people to understand the roles and responsibilities of people like our district attorneys. And in Manhattan, our borough has $700 million in forfeiture funds that have been taken from communities of color through different moments of surveillance, over policing, large tactical raids of resources from our communities. They've been building RICO cases against low-level drug offenders across communities in Harlem and Washington Heights for years. All of that money is sitting in a fund. And we as taxpayers and residents in Manhattan deserve for that money to be reinvested right now in something that will help solve the issues of public safety. And so when I'm talking about, when our team started talking about what does Action Lab really want to do, Action Lab wants to make sure that we're building the bridge between what is people wanting to take action and people actually having the impact and taking the action, which right now New York City, regardless of the movement spaces, we still have the lowest voter turnout rate of any major city. And we can look at the special elections from yesterday and point to that same figure, that no matter how many people are protesting in the streets, we will not win power. We will not have equitable budgets if New Yorkers don't vote. And so, one of the main things we're prepping ourselves for outside of our movement-based support work is the political movement to the polls that will have to happen between May and June for us to get the city set of leadership we need to take us out of this very devastating time locally. And so Tahani Abushi is running for Manhattan District Attorney. She has a very powerful story where her father had done 20 years for a tobacco crime. So I know as a Latino, always having lived in a low-income community, what people deem as low-income, right, because our educational attainment and the access to jobs are always problematic, that people are looking at our communities like we don't vote. And I know that Latinos feel that pain of what it's like to lose a parent to long stints of incarceration. And so how do we use these stories and the things that she's done in the course of her career to make sure we're getting people excited to vote? And just more recently, right, our work has spanned across several states. And so we know that New York, because of our accessibility to resources and our ability to mobilize people, we're very powerful in the national conversations because our expertises and our opportunities to gain press momentum are so much stronger in New York. That Action Lab has actually planted 2 action hubs, one in Louisville, Kentucky, and one in Chicago, Illinois. And both of these states are strategic because we've been building relationships with organizers and rapid responders through our course of supporting the family of Breonna Taylor. We've taken about 15 trips back and forth to Louisville. About 4 to 6 organizers from my team have been going back and forth. And now we're very excited to roll out an internship program with young people from Louisville that will be taking young people who are both going to University of Louisville and who have been active in the fight for Breonna Taylor. They've been holding down Brewer Park. They'll be coming up to New York for 8 to 12 week sessions to actually do field work and build with organizers here. And very similarly so, this weekend, our team will be in Chicago, Illinois, leading an action against, Watsika County. There is a prison called Iroquois County Jail, which is in Watsika, Illinois, where on August 27th last year, 2 men, one black brother, Andre Maiden, 24 years old, and one white brother, Jason Francher, who was in his early 40s, both were murdered by the jail staff due to medical negligence. And so there still are no medical staff at that prison. These brothers were set to see a jury of their peers the following week, and they were denied, that basic human right as they were in their cells, screaming for medical attention, calling their families, begging for help, and both men succumbed to their ailments and their injuries, right? And so we see our work in New York as us scaling to support our communities here, but more importantly, we're in a moment where our whole country is fighting for justice together, and Action Lab is just excited to be able to share our resources and our expertises wherever people are intentionally trying to pay attention and build for directly impacted people and around solutions that we can see now.
Well, Carlene, I can literally talk to you for hours, and as I'm calling them, the after times, the after coronavirus times, you and I should definitely figure out time just to talk about organizing and how it's changed and movements across the country. But for now, thank you so much for joining us, for talking about organizing. I know our listeners are going to learn a ton when they get to hear this. Thank you, Carlene. For our listeners, you can learn more about Carlene's work in New York City Action Lab by visiting nycactionlab.com. And, thanks again for joining us. You can learn about us at Brooklyn Community Bail Fund by visiting our website, brooklynbailfund.org. You can also follow us or DM us on Twitter at BK Bail Fund or Instagram at Brooklyn Bail Fund. Don't forget to rate us, share our podcast, leave us a review. And until next time, and until we're all free, peace out. Just a little disclaimer, we at Brooklyn Community Bail Fund are, we are a non-profit organization, and so we don't endorse any candidates, although we are doing work around the Manhattan DA's race. You can stay tuned. We will be releasing a voter guide where our listeners and our readers, if you follow our newsletter, can learn about all of the candidates and their stances on all of the issues that we care about at BCBF, the issues that we talk about on this podcast as well.